What if you weren't meant to survive? What if the game was never about fighting, winning, or escaping, but enduring the slow, methodical erosion of everything that made you feel human? Horror games don't terrify us because we die. They terrify us because they teach us that death might be the least we could lose. First, it's the weapon in your hand. Then it's the light in the hallway. Then it's your name, your memories, your shape. Until you're nothing but a vessel. A body moving through someone else's nightmare. Freedom is the freedom to say 2 plus 2 make 4. If that is granted, all else follows. George Orwell, 1984. In 1984, Orwell wasn't talking about math. He was talking about agency, about the brutal machinery of systems that don't just control your actions, but that dictate truth, memory, and even identity. In horror games, this control becomes the engine of fear. Not through combat or monsters, but through disorientation, silence, and helplessness, until you forget what it felt like to ever be in control. Everything you relied on, logic, movement, and even vision, becomes a weapon turned against you. Every design is deliberate. Every absence is a presence. Every step forward is another piece lost to the dark. We explore how horror games strip away power, layer by layer, until fear isn't just what you feel, it's something you become. You will scream, run, and maybe even survive, but you'll never walk away whole. There is a unique kind of horror that does not scream, it whispers. It doesn't leap at you with sharpened claws, but slowly encroaches, eroding your sense of control until you realize that you were never the one in charge. That's the horror of powerlessness, slow, deliberate, and all-consuming. It doesn't just frighten you, it breaks you. This is the kind of horror we find in games that rob the player of agency. Not by mistake, but by design, where the inability to act isn't a flaw, but the point, where survival is not achieved through domination or strength, but through endurance, submission, and suffering. These are the spaces where horror thrives, not in chaos, but in control's absence. Horror games have always been trafficked in fear, but it's not the monsters that linger, it's the silence after, the locked door, the broken gun, the breath you didn't realize you were holding in. In these moments, when choice is stripped away, when the interface betrays you and the game world tightens in, you feel something raw, something real. But horror, at its most effective, isn't about what you see, it's about what you can't do. Powerlessness is the heart of horror. It is a slow, suffocating realization that control is slipping away through your fingers, sometimes physically, sometimes mentally, and even sometimes existentially. Horror games do not merely frighten us with monsters or gore, they haunt us by confronting us with our own limitations and vulnerabilities. These limitations can be divided into 3 haunting facets: physical, psychological, and existential powerlessness. Each one chips away at the player's sense of agency, plunging them deeper into despair and dread. At its most immediate level, powerlessness hits where survival is most primal, our bodies. The fear of being unable to defend oneself, to run from danger, or to even respond, triggers an instinctual alarm within us. This is the terror born from our fragile morality. In horror games, this manifests through the deliberate loss of movement, speed, stamina, or access to reliable weapons. The player who expects to be capable and resilient is suddenly forced into vulnerability. Imagine a chase sequence where every sprint drains stamina rapidly, or the echo of an empty weapon's click. There is no salvation in firepower here. The body becomes a liability rather than a fortress. This physical disempowerment taps directly into our survival anxiety. Our minds scream in panic. We become vulnerable when our methods of self-preservation get hampered. It is not just the threat that terrifies, it's the knowledge that our very capacity to fight back is slipping away. But horror does not stop at the flesh. It creeps into the mind, the most intimate and sacred sanctuary, turning the player's own perception into a battlefield. Psychological powerlessness is the shattering of trust in one's own memories, senses, and identity. When the mind becomes unreliable, horror strikes with a unique, insidious cruelty. Games that distort timelines, fracture realities, or twist identities force the player into the role of the unreliable narrator. Memories may be false, familiar places warped beyond recognition. Even one's sense of self becomes a shifting mirage. Here, powerlessness is internalized. The player is trapped with a mind they cannot trust. This form of disempowerment is deeply destabilizing. It questions the very nature of what is real and what is an illusion. The player no longer commands their story. They are pulled helplessly through a nightmare made from fractured thoughts and erased truths. This bleeds a profound dread, one that lingers when immediate threats have passed. The final and most abstract phase of powerlessness is existential. It goes beyond the body and mind, plunging into a chasm of meaninglessness itself. In existential powerlessness, the player confronts the terrifying notion that nothing they do truly matters. The world is not just dangerous, it's rigged, broken, and utterly indifferent to their suffering. Every struggle, every choice, every hope becomes a futile gesture against an overwhelming, uncaring void. The sense of cosmic dread is the darkest of them all. It is the realization that fate is not in our hands, and that the universe will still go on regardless of our pain or resistance. Horror games evoke this terror often, dismantling narrative coherence, reset progress in cycles, or trap the player in labyrinths with no escape. The dread they instill is existential, a paralysis in the face of meaninglessness. Understanding these three facets of powerlessness is crucial, because horror games do more than simply frighten. They manipulate the player expectations of control and agency. In the next section, we will explore how games subvert the very idea that our actions have power, creating an atmosphere where hope is slowly stripped away and the illusion of control shatters. This delicate balance between what we expect to be able to do and what the game allows us to do is where true fear takes root. At the heart of most video games is the fundamental promise: you press a button, something happens. This cause and effect relationship is the cornerstone of player empowerment. You move your player, you solve puzzles, you defeat your enemies, your input produces a meaningful outcome. Horror games, however, deliberately unravel this expectation, twisting control into its sinister opposite: helplessness. From the moment you start a horror game, you anticipate a sense of agency. You expect to navigate the world, to fight back, or escape danger. But these games slowly strip away those freedoms or deny them outright. Buttons that once triggered reliable responses become unreliable and useless. Keys don't unlock doors. Doors don't open. Weapons malfunction or are absent completely. Movement slows. Stamina drains. And the safety net you rely on vanishes without warning. This subversion is deeply unsettling because it violates an ingrained trust between player and the game. The player's learned assumption that actions matter is called into question. This creates a persistent tension between what you expect and what the game allows, a tension that builds anticipation and dread. You start to wonder, what if I can't act at all? What if my efforts are futile? The illusion of agency becomes a fragile veil, repeatedly torn away when the player thinks they regain control. This is a state of tug-of-war between empowerment and helplessness. This sharpens the horror experience. Moments of fleeting control feel precarious because they are so rare and fragile. In this way, horror games use player expectations not just as gameplay mechanics, but as a psychological weapon. This slow erosion of agency mirrors the story's themes of entrapment, vulnerability, and despair. It makes every failed escape, every locked door, every denied action feel personal, not just a scripted obstacle, but a betrayal of the player's will. This fragile balance between control and helplessness is only part of the landscape horror games navigate. To truly understand how powerlessness grips us, we must explore the complex emotions beneath it: fear, helplessness, and the deeper, lingering horror that refuses to fade. Fear is immediate, a sharp jolt that bursts through the calm, triggered by an approaching enemy or sudden threat. It's the primal alarm, the rush of adrenaline, that pushes your body into survival mode. In horror games, this might be a sudden chase, a grotesque monster appearing in the shadows, or an unexpected noise just beyond your hearing. The instant reaction is visceral, rooted in the survival instinct embedded in every human being, but fear alone is fleeting. What lingers longer is the helplessness, a sustained emotional weight that settles deep in the chest. It's the realization that you have no agency, no power to influence your fate, or alter your suffering. Helplessness is not just about being scared. It's the understanding that you are trapped, that your efforts to escape or fight back are futile. This creates an emotional exhaustion that bleeds into every moment, which fuels the player's experience with dread and resignation. Beyond helplessness lies the horror in its most profound form: existential dread. This is slow, suffocating fear that remains after the immediate danger has passed. It is the terrifying awareness that your actions, no matter how desperate, might ultimately be meaningless. Cosmic horror strips away the illusion that the world operates under fair rules or moral order. Instead, it reveals a universe indifferent or even hostile to human existence, a place where fate is cruel, reality itself is unstable, and hope is fleeting. In gameplay, this emotional spectrum is not accidental. It is meticulously crafted. The sudden spike of fear keeps the player on edge. The crushing helplessness draws them deeper into despair. and the existential horror leaves a lingering unease that haunts long after the screen goes black. The spectrum mirrors the human experience of trauma itself, a jarring moment of crisis, followed by a prolonged helplessness and the slow, often unresolved grief that follows. In horror games, the environment is never just a backdrop, it's an active force working against you. Tight corridors, narrow hallways, and locked doors don't simply confine the player physically, they trap the mind and spirit. Architecture becomes a weapon in itself, designed to disorient, intimidate, and restrict movement. Low lighting hides threats and deepens uncertainty, forcing the player to question every shadow and corner. The architecture itself often feels hostile. The use of blind corners means threats can lurk just out of sight, forcing players to hesitate or tread nervously, heightening tension. The brain strains to fill these visual gaps with possibilities, sometimes monstrous, sometimes deadly. Even seemingly safe areas become unsettling through the absence of light or detail. This pervasive darkness instills a primal fear of the unseen and the unknown, an anxiety rooted in human survival instincts. Sudden environmental changes deepen this unease. Rooms may subtly shift, doors open and close unexpectedly, and landmarks might disappear or rearrange themselves, breaking the player's spatial understanding. This intentional instability creates a sensation that the world is not fixed, but fluid and hostile, an environment that rejects the player's presence. This not only disorients, but dismantles the comforting assumption that the world can be learned and mastered, a fundamental aspect in many games. Horror games shatter this expectation, leaving the player vulnerable and confused. Beyond physical entrapment, some spaces themselves become antagonists. Silent, omnipresent threats that do not require enemies to be terrifying. These areas evoke dread purely through atmosphere, flickering lights, ominous echoes, and oppressive silence. Such spaces plagued with sensory expectations. The absence of the overt threat paradoxically becomes a threat. The environment is no longer a passive stage, but an active participant in the horror, exerting psychological pressure that wears down the player's resolve. Consider how games like Silent Hill 2 utilize fog and urban decay to create a world that feels alive with malevolence, where every creak and shadow implies danger, or how Amnesia: The Dark Descent traps players in a claustrophobic castle with winding passages and dark corridors, forcing careful navigation in a world that feels both endless and confined. Even games without visible monsters leverage these tactics. The very layout and presentation of space drives fear and powerlessness. Now that we understand how the environment itself becomes a silent, suffocating opponent, we must examine the critical role of sensory deprivation and sound in stripping away the player's sense of control and awareness. In horror games, sound isn't just an accessory, it's a weapon wielded to manipulate the player's emotion and sense of control. Our brains rely heavily on audio cues to interpret our surroundings and anticipate danger. When this trusted channel is disrupted or weaponized, it evokes a primal and unsettling feeling of vulnerability. One of the most common techniques is muffling or distorting environmental sounds. When familiar noises, footsteps, breathing, or distant voices are muted or warped, the player's sense of situational awareness collapses. This deprivation creates a sensory void where danger could lurk anywhere, and the player's instinct to listen to threats is thwarted. This uncertainty creates an anxiety because the brain struggles to fill in the gaps, often imagining threats far worse than reality. The use of off-screen noises, sounds that come from beyond the player's immediate field of vision, amplifies this tension. A faint creak, a whisper, or anything that could cause the player to jump provokes a fight or flight response. The player's mind races to locate the source, but this pursuit is often futile. This distance between hearing a threat and not seeing it intensifies feelings of helplessness and paranoia. Then there are moments of dead silence, the sudden, total absence of sound. Silence in horror games is never neutral. It signals that something is wrong or something is about to happen. The silence traps the player in a heightened state of anticipation, where every heartbeat, breath, or distant echo is magnified. The pause in auditory stimuli becomes oppressive, as the player waits, frozen, for the inevitable intrusion of terror. Music also plays a pivotal role in shaping emotional responses. Horror games often use dynamic music that stops abruptly or shifts tone without warning. When music cuts out before the jump scare or an unseen threat appears, a sudden vacuum feels like a loss of control. The player, who had just been confronted or distracted by a musical score, is plunged into a raw, unmediated fear. Conversely, eerie and dissonant soundtracks induce a steady state of unease, preparing the player for horror but never fully realizing it. These auditory manipulations are so effective because they tap into basic human survival instincts. We are hardwired to listen to danger, especially in situations where vision is limited, when sound fails us, or worse, is weaponized against us. Our internal sense of safety unravels. The illusion of control shatters, and with it, the player's confidence in navigating the game world. Moreover, sound can directly influence gameplay mechanics, making the player freeze or panic. For instance, a door creaking open behind you may cause involuntary hesitation, mimicking the freeze response in real life. This not only heightens immersion but also limits player action, reinforcing the theme of powerlessness. In sum, sound and sensory deprivation in horror games are more than atmospheric tools. They are active forces that manipulate player perception, control, and emotion. By depriving players of reliable sensory input, these games make the world uncertain, hostile, and uncontrollable. The emotional weight of powerlessness in horror games goes far beyond mere gameplay mechanics. It cuts to the core why players care at all. Their psychological investments in the character they control. When we play a game, especially one rooted in narrative immersion, we just don't push buttons and watch pixels move. We inhabit a character, share their fears, hopes, and vulnerabilities. This connection transforms the player's experience from abstract challenge to visceral personal ideal. When the character suffers or faces disempowerment, the player feels it too. This bond intensifies the impact of powerlessness, making it more than just frustrating. It becomes deeply unsettling. Players expect to have agency to overcome obstacles with skill and strategy. Horror games break this expectation, flipping the script so players are no longer the heroes, but the hunted, the victims, the fragile ones on the edge of collapse. This shift taps into primal fears, the terror of helplessness, the dread of being overwhelmed, and the anxiety of impending doom without recourse. Because players identify with the characters they control, their sense of control is immediately tied to their perception of self in the game. When that control is stripped away, when movement is sluggish, weapons fail, or escape routes vanish, the player experiences a loss of autonomy that resembles real-world fears. The result is a layered emotional response. There's the immediate adrenaline spike when the threat appears, but beneath that lies a sustained state of helplessness that attacks the psyche. The lingering helplessness that fosters a mood of dread that colors every decision, every action, every hesitation. It's a slow burn that makes moments of relief fleeting and rare, which deepens immersion. Horror games exploit this psychological dynamic by carefully calibrating moments of power and powerlessness. When the player briefly gains control, finding a weapon, unlocking a door, or surviving a chase, it feels like a fragile victory. But these moments are often short-lived, followed by renewed threats or restrictions that remind the player of how precarious their position is. Ultimately, player psychological investment transforms mechanical powerlessness into emotional and existential terror. The player isn't just trapped in a hostile environment, they are trapped in a narrative and emotional experience that questions their ability to act, resist, or escape. Case Study 1: SCP Containment Breach, Physical Powerlessness. In the eerie, unpredictable halls of SCP Containment Breach, powerlessness is not an occasional hurdle. It is the very foundation of player experience. This game is a masterclass in physical vulnerability, creating an atmosphere where survival hinges on evasion, observation, and sheer luck rather than brute strength or offensive capability. From the moment the player steps into the chaotic facility, it becomes clear that the traditional tools of defense are virtually non-existent. The player cannot fight back. The gameplay loops around fleeing, hiding, and careful timing, emphasizing a fragile physicality that taps into our most instinctive survival fears. A key source of tension in SCP Containment Breach is the loss of control over one's body and environment. Movement is limited. The player's speed is never guaranteed. The way you interact with the world is desperate, and every moment feels like a panic-fueled gambit. This physical frailty makes every moment a test of endurance and quick reflexes, drawing players into a state of heightened anxiety. But what truly distinguishes the game's design is how it forces players into a constant tense observation, never certain when the next threat will appear or from which direction. The infamous SCP-173 embodies this mechanic. It kills the player instantly if unobserved, so the player must maintain an impossible vigilance. Blinking or looking away means death. This mechanic weaponizes the player's basic physiology against them, transforming an involuntary action into a fatal liability. In contrast, SCP-096 turns observation into a paradoxical danger. Looking at this creature's face triggers an unstoppable pursuit and certain death. The player's gaze becomes both a tool and a trap. Too much attention kills, but too little means you can't keep it in your vision. This constant battle over where and how to look injects a nerve-wracking tension into gameplay. The facility itself compounds this physical powerlessness. Lights flicker and fail. Hallways become hotspots, and doors and locks slide open at inopportune moments. The environment is hostile and unpredictable. offering no sanctuary. The player feels trapped in a labyrinth with shifting rules, where the usual logic of safety dissolves. The constant unpredictability reinforces the chilling thematic undercurrent. You are not just alone, you're being observed by something incomprehensible. Your survival depends on understanding, and even then, outsmarting a system that is indifferent, impersonal, and mechanized. The horror here isn't a monster stalking you, it is an institutionalized nightmare where control is an illusion, and the player is a test subject in an unending experiment. Case Study 2: Tormented Souls. Psychological Powerlessness. Having examined physical powerlessness in SCP Containment Breach, we now shift inward into a labyrinth of the mind, where horror takes a deeply psychological form. Tormented Souls embodies this internalized disempowerment, plunging the player into a fractured reality where memory, identity, and perception unravel. At its core is Caroline, a protagonist burdened with amnesia and trauma. Her fragmented memories mirror the player's growing disorientation, creating an unsettling connection between character and player. From the outset, Caroline's loss of self is palpable. She awakens in a cold, clinical environment with missing memories and a missing eye, symbols of a fractured identity and impaired perception. The game's dual-world mirror mechanic deepens this sense of psychological powerlessness. Players are forced to navigate between realities that don't align clearly, twisting cause and effect into perplexing puzzles that challenge not only the player's skill, but their grasp on what is real. This mechanic mirrors Caroline's fractured mind, where cause and consequence blur, and understanding becomes the elusive prize. Beyond mechanics, Tormented Souls uses its environment as a metaphor for psychological disintegration. The cold sterility of the surgical rooms, the stark clinical lighting, and the presence of mutilated enemies evoke a world where the body is a battlefield and the self is under siege. The setting exploits the primal fear of medical violation, the terror of being operated on, restrained, or altered against one's will. Though Caroline is armed, the traditional sense of security that weapons bring is undercut by the overwhelming psychological dread that permeates the experience. The player's powerlessness becomes internalized. No amount of firepower can outdo the trauma, the memory loss, or the creeping realization that the body is no longer a safe haven. Progression through Tormented Souls leads to more questions, deeper unease, and the unsettling thought of what exactly has been done to Caroline. What remains of her true self? Case Study 3: Alyssa, Existential Powerlessness. Having journeyed through the physical and psychological layers of powerlessness, we now arrive at the most abstract and harrowing form: existential powerlessness. Alyssa plunges players into a world where control, identity, and reality slip through their fingers, creating a haunting atmosphere of cosmic dread and futility. At first glance, Alyssa evokes the classic PS1 era survival horror aesthetics. Tank controls, fixed camera angles, and stiff movement all contribute to the feeling of alienation. These mechanical constraints are not flaws, they are deliberate tools designed to make the player feel disconnected from Alyssa. But beyond the controls lies a deeper, more insidious form of powerlessness. The world of Alyssa is populated by uncanny doll-like enemies in spaces that defy logic, purpose, and coherence. These environments feel more like a theatrical stage set, yet surprisingly real. Players can act, but never with enough freedom and understanding. Every action is limited, every choice feels constrained. This systematic limitation forces the player into a state of constant unease. Narratively, Alyssa's gradual dissolution of identity is mirrored in gameplay. The more she stays trapped in the dollhouse, it starts to feel she's becoming less of a person and more of a doll. Fixed camera angles further reduce visual autonomy, making it harder to orient oneself and increasing dependence on the game's perspective. This slow erosion is the core of existential powerlessness, the terrifying loss of self, agency, and meaning. The game asks the player to not only survive physical threats, but to confront the possibility of losing oneself. Alyssa's existential horror lies in the quiet, pervasive realization that you are losing yourself, not through death or violence, but through the slow, unrelenting removal of identity and control. It is not the monster chasing you that terrifies most, it is the vanishing of who you are. Before we conclude, I'll provide an analysis of key scenes from Friday the 13th, the final chapter. This cinematic breakdown serves to deepen our understanding of how horror films use similar techniques of powerlessness and tension to those found in horror games. By drawing these connections, we can see how horror reinforces the themes of fear, helplessness, and dread that define the genre. Hello, you made it to the end of the video. So this is where I normally do my analysis, but this time things are going to be a little tiny bit different. So as many of you guys know, I love horror games. I love horror movies just as much, and this is my jurisdiction area. So I feel by doing an analysis of specific horror films, I can tie it into the narrative that I'm trying to write. So this time around, we'll be using Friday the 13th, the final chapter, Jason Voorhees instead of Michael Myers. Jason Voorhees does cover a lot of tropes that Michael Myers doesn't actually cover himself, because Michael Myers is more of a methodical killer. Jason Voorhees is just pure unadulterated carnage. So we have to be very specific in which version of Jason we pick. This time we're going to be using human Jason, not zombie Jason. Zombie Jason came full circle after the conclusion of this movie, actually. You can't kill zombie Jason. He's dead. Like, he tanks everything. Like, you cannot kill him. Like, he will always get back and come right back at you. The only person who pretty much did a good job of actively fighting him was not Carrie in that one movie. And she was pretty much just throwing everything at him. And I'm going to say this with a straight face. She won. Blew up the mask. Blew up the original hockey mask. She tossed nails at his head. She hit him with a light fixture, knocked him into a basement, doused him with gasoline, lit him on fire, which blew up the house, and he still kept on coming. And earlier in the movie, she dropped a section of a house on top of him. It got to the point where she just became like a very annoying inconvenience for Jason. He was like, fuck it. I'm not even going to go after the final guy. I'm just going right after you. So it wouldn't be fair to use zombie Jason in this analysis. So we'll be using human Jason. So for many people that don't know, human Jason from 2 until this movie was human. Like, he really was. Like, he can be killed. He was actually killed at the end of this movie. So a lot of people don't know is from Friday the 13th 2 all the way till this movie, it's like days apart, a couple of days apart. So he's been taking considerable amount of damage throughout these couple of days, whether it be getting just manhandled, bopped, the axe wound, not manhandled. That's kind of like pushing it. He's been inconvenienced, so he has been taking damage. So I feel this is probably the fairest you'll ever get to a 1v1 against Jason, because by the time he gets to like Trish and Tommy's final chase sequence, like, he's been through the ringer. Like, he's been suffering through the axe wound, various injuries throughout the past couple of days. Anyways, I yapped enough. I'll see you guys in the analysis. Okay, guys, we're back. So we're going to do the analysis, but y'all got to bear with me. As many people know, Friday the 13th can be very extra. Jason goes out of his way sometimes, a little bit too much extra. So what we're going to do is we're going to go by scene and do an analysis of every single aspect of it and how it ties into the narrative. So unfortunately, the full movie is not on YouTube, so we got to go through other people's stuff. So credit to the original uploaders. All right, let's begin. Don't drink unless you're an adult. Oh, this one's great. Again, Jason has a very bad habit of going extra in his kills. Trish sees the blood. What do you do when you see a dead body or, a killer's around? You run. But don't scream like this. Very notorious scene coming up. He's killing me! He's killing me! Sorry if this is way too dark. Run, Trish! Ow. He is still alive! Why are you going back down there, Trish? So main male lead is dead now. He's definitely dead. But for some weird reason, Trish decided to go back down there. He's clearly dead. So what do you do in a situation like this? Do you go back down or do you run away? You can see the powerlessness she feels right now. There's Jason. Ow. Okay, so this one, I know I might get some flack for this one, but her death is very debatable. Till this day, I'm still gonna be under the assumption that she didn't die right away. People have probably seen the meme for this movie. She was in the bedroom, she was in the room. Jason grabbed her from the outside in the window, just yeeted her outside from the window, and she landed on top of a car. That that was not that high. It was maybe arguably 3 stories, and there was a car right there. Sure, she ricocheted right off the car, but I don't think she should have probably died there. I've seen enough Jackass to see like, yeah, she probably would have been knocked out, probably banged up a little bit, but yeah, she's definitely dead. But Jason, he has a very bad habit of making his victims or whoever he's stalking slash trying to kill terrified. So he was going around planting bodies of people that he killed in very weird places. So initially, she was not here. So he must have moved her. He moved her, definitely moved her from where she died. So if she was still alive, he probably double tapped just in case. Because if you watch over that scene one more time, she landed on her shoulder, but you can see her legs are kind of bruised up right here. But anyways, carrying on. Again, I'm gonna be like still debating that she didn't die from the initial impact of getting yeeted from the window and landing on top of that car. Her sister, though, that's a different story. And another one, he killed this guy, and for some reason, he thought it'd be cute just to drag his body and crucify him on this door just for his shock terror. Funny thing is, Trish could have actually just went right under the dude's lens. You know, she still has the machete. She has the machete a lot in this movie. Yeah, there's the car. It's like she got yeeted, not from that high up, probably the second floor, landed on top of this, ricocheted off the car. You can see the glass from her impact, and she landed on the ground. So she probably didn't die right away. She's probably just knocked out. Okay, so we're back to the next sequence. Just so you guys know, Miss Voorhees and Jason Voorhees have a very notorious habit of just yeeting people through windows for shock value, which you guys are about to see. So sit back and relax. Let's go over this. Trish, he's dead. We know he's dead, Trish. Again, this is human Jason getting hit with a hammer in the head. Oh! You can see the tension and the powerlessness right now. What are they supposed to do? He systematically killed everybody in comedic fashion. What can they do against this? Sequence is very suspenseful. You just don't know what's going to happen. The musical score does a very good job of this. It builds up the suspense. You got to give it to Jason Voorhees. He's very versatile when it comes to weapon usage. Where did he get that axe? She hit him with a head with a TV. Pay attention to the body. He's still conscious. But again, this is suspenseful. What are you supposed to do? Do you just go over him? Or do you just stay there? What would you do? That silence aspect is great here. Ooh, so close. Again, where did he get that axe from? Again, she runs back to the house that she just came from. Again, this is Jason fucking Voorhees chasing after you. Holy crap. And she's only gone up one story. Do you see why I argue about one of the twins dying? All right, next sequence. Okay, we're back again. As you can see, Trish survived her two-story fall. I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to take that to the grave. I still feel that twin should not have died initially from that fall, but who am I to say anything? I'm just a random guy on YouTube that does lore videos. But anyways, hopefully you guys did get the gist of what I was trying to get at. Like this whole entire chase sequence, you just feel powerless when Jason Voorhees, is human Jason out of all people, is just chasing after you. He just keeps on coming and coming and coming. No matter how many times you down him, he'll be up. And it gets worse when he's a zombie because he just can't die. At least in this, he dies eventually. But we won't play the whole scene. We'll just showcase a little bit of it, then I'll get into detail about why I showed this. So, one thing to note, I do get squeamish about what's about to happen. I don't know why, but every time I see this scene, it's like, ooh, I gotta turn away. But as you can see, Trish is looking downwards. I mentioned this before. Throughout this entire movie, I think she has Jason's machete more times than Jason actually has his machete. It's not technically Jason's machete; it's just the machete that main male lead had before he died. Just the fact that she was able to know he was behind her is actually pretty great. And as you can see, even with a weapon, Jason's still coming after her. Like she technically, in a sense, has the advantage because she has a weapon on her. But it's Jason Voorhees. What are you supposed to do? It's like he's the unstoppable force, and you're just trying not to die. And it's like, okay, whatever. You have a weapon. I'm still coming after you. So again, I gotta turn away because this scene always gets me. No, every time. Every time. God damn. And as you can see, she's okay. But anyways, she survives because Tommy ends up playing some psychological bullshit warfare that makes him. He cuts his hair off, makes himself look like Jason when he was young, and it goes from there. Jason dies when when the machete goes through his damn eye, and he's still moving, by the way. And then Tom just like beats the shit out of him with the machete and just chops him up. Then he actually straight up dies. I can actually play that real quick. I'm gonna look away because that scene always gets to me. That's so disgusting. Ugh. Oh, damn. I'm sorry. I love horror movies, but I do have to look away whenever I see that shit. Then Tommy sees Jason's body starts to move. Then he just starts Tommy starts hacking at him with the machete. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the analysis. I apologize, but yeah, every time I see that, whenever it comes to like eye mutilation or just hands, that just always gets to me. Anyways, back to the video. Powerlessness is the core that anchors horror's emotional grip. It infiltrates every facet of the experience, from the primal fear of body vulnerability to the shattering of one's self and sense of reality, to the crushing void where meaning itself erodes. In horror, powerlessness is not a momentary setback, it's a pervasive condition that seeps into every crevice of the mind and body. We enter the world expecting control, mastery, and agency, but instead we find our hands tied, our perceptions shattered, and our very existence questioned. This relentless stripping away of power exposes the fragility of not just the character, but of the self. The environments become hostile prisons, sound becomes a weapon of isolation, gameplay mechanics become metaphors for loss. Brief moments of strength only remind us of how fleeting control truly is. The dread that lingers is not just of monsters or enemies, but of being utterly unmoored in a world that no longer makes sense or offers hope. As the philosopher Simone Weil once stated, attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. In horror, this attention, our focus on the world, on reality, on ourselves, is constantly challenged and fractured. The games force us to watch, to listen, to grasp for meaning, even as it slips away. Our attention is assaulted, fragmented, and made powerless. Through that powerlessness, the horror takes hold. Then a question remains. If everything can be taken from us, our bodies, our memories, and even our agency, then what part of us truly belong to ourselves?